This is a story about a real person named Sarah. She thought she was living a better life with opioids. When she was pregnant with her fourth child, she started to use harder drugs. She wanted to be a good mom, but she didn't know how. Not giving up on the hope of recovery was the most important thing she could do. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
Tobacco-Free Florida has many free ways to help you quit nicotine. From free 2-week starter kits of quit aids to free cessation services like Phone Quit and Group Quit. We're even trying out new motivational tactics.
You're the greatest quitter.
He's tobacco's greatest quitter. He's tobacco's greatest quitter of all.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com or call 1-877-YOU-CAN-NOW for free nicotine patches.
Let's get ready to mortgage. He is the prince of programs, guru of guidelines, master of matrices. He puts the fun in funding. Please welcome Mark, Mr. Mark-eitel.
All right, my name is Mark-eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. And you're in the right place if you want the information, the deep dive of the data, all of the insider tips, tricks, and strategies that you need to go out there and make better real estate and mortgage decisions for you and your family. And I know there are a ton of questions swirling around out there surrounding the topic of real estate and more specifically, mortgages and interest rates. There's just so much news, doom and gloom, and soothsayers out there trying to poke this housing market with a stick. It reminds me of a bunch of kids swinging at a piñata. Everybody wants it to hit the ground. I don't know what they're expecting to come out of it, because I promise you there's not a lot of candy that's going to fall out of a real estate bust. But the good news is it doesn't look like we're in a bust cycle anytime soon. But hey, you're in the right place if you've got questions around any of that. And if you do have questions, we encourage you to call or text them to the Anytime Hotline. And that number is 855-462-7292. That's 855-462-7292. That is the Anytime Hotline. And we call it that because it rings here in the studio when Dom and I are doing the show, but it also pushes to my office during the week. So if you need us, write that number down, 855-462-7292. And you can get us anytime on that number. But if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, I usually start off with the headlines of the week and the data and all of that. Well, this week there was a ton of news released around finance and real estate, mortgage rates, all of that. And it had a lot to do with the consumer price index numbers that were released earlier in the week. And almost every economist assumed, because of gas prices, how far they've fallen, that we were going to see a flat or a lowering number in the CPI. Everybody was kind of breathing a sigh of relief, thinking, okay, inflation's peaked, we've got it under control, we're going to start to be on the downward spiral, if you will, of the inflation cycle. Well, wrong. That CPI number came out higher than everybody expected. And on the surface, the jump was not that big, right? 0.1% month over month. But that was in spite of the big reduction in gas prices. And that's what caught everybody off guard. And you saw the sell-off in the stock market, and that carried over into the bond in the mortgage-backed security market. Now, what does all that mean to you? Interest rates jumped on that news. And they jumped on that news because the theory is, in the face of this red-hot inflation, that the Federal Reserve is not only going to continue to raise interest rates, but may increase the hikes, right? So everybody kind of baked into the cake a 0.75 of a point hike later this month. And now there's some thought around a 1% interest rate hike. And you've heard me say it many, many times before, the Federal Reserve overnight interest rate doesn't directly impact mortgage rates. However, everything kind of moves in the same direction. And a lot of the mortgage rate activity of this week was, pre-planning, if you will, the selling into the idea that the Fed's going to start to increase at larger jumps. So the a bigger number is starting to be baked into the cake. So hopefully we get through this next announcement and we don't see any more increases, because it's already assumed that that's going to be the case. And that's what happened during the last increase. And if you remember, rates came back down a little bit after that. So there's some optimism going into the meeting around that. But nonetheless, what all that means to you is if you're applying for a mortgage today versus last week, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. And that's one more reason why waiting is rarely the answer. And it made me think of an old story that, I don't, and I'm going to beat this up a little bit, but it's been 100 years since I've heard it. But there was a guy, and, there's a flood coming and it's pouring rain, and he's in his house, and the police come to the door and knock on the door and warn him to evacuate. And he says, "Don't worry, God's going to take care of me." And then the streets flood and the water's coming up to the house, and the neighbors come by in a canoe and say, "Hey, we're evacuating. We'll get you out of here. Come with us." No, don't worry. God's going to take care of me. And he ends up on the roof of his house, and the flood waters are up to the fascia of the outside of the house. He's sitting on the roof, and the helicopter comes flying by, and they lower the basket and, "Get in, we're going to rescue you." No, don't worry. God's going to take care of me. Well, he ends up at the pearly gates and says, "Hey, God, where were you? I was waiting for you to, come pluck me off that roof and save me." And God said, "Well, hey, I sent the police, I sent your neighbors in a canoe, and finally I sent the helicopter." So, I'm sharing all that because at some point we can't just keep waiting for something to change, for something to get better, because it may get worse. And we've talked about it many, many times on the show. Over time, real estate always historically has made sense. And I shared stories about clients who bought at the utmost of the peak last time, right? The very top of the boom cycle in the early 2000s. And now today they're sitting on a ton of equity and happy and, thrilled. They got through it. They got, they stayed in their house. They loved their house. They made their payments and, happily ever after. So everybody just exhale, breathe a sigh of relief. The end of the world is not coming, and it's up to us to take care of ourselves. The government's not going to save us. There's no magic loan program that's going to make all of this better. We just have to buckle down and make the best decisions for us and our families moving forward. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to answer your questions around all that and give you the info that you need to go out there and make those decisions. So as I mentioned, all the news this week was around the CPI index numbers that were released. Inflation is here to stay for a while, and the Federal Reserve is likely to continue marching the overnight rate up, which sadly is going to make everything except your fixed rate mortgage more expensive, because the overnight rate dictates things like credit cards, business credit lines, personal credit lines, anything where the payment adjusts based on the interest rate. Those rates move with the overnight rate or the prime rate, and that's what the Fed controls. So that being said, a lot of people moving forward are going to start to look to their equity or to other credit vehicles to maybe pay off some debt or some high interest rate credit cards. And we're going to dive into all that this week. We've got some really interesting conversations that were had this week around some new alternative credit vehicles that are available, collateral other than real estate, with some pretty attractive rates. So we're going to dive into all that. But here's a headline that I thought was fun. I didn't know this, but Jim Beam. Are you familiar, Dom, with Jim Beam?
I am.
Have you partaken in some Jim Beam?
I haven't. Will tomorrow.
Yeah, Dom's got a great weekend planned. So when he leaves the studio, he's off to an amazing music event. But I didn't know you were a Jim Beam fan. But here's something I found super interesting around all of this, Green New Deal and environmental consciousness that we're all aware of. Jim Beam announced a $400 million initiative to make their distillery in, I'm going to butcher the name here, Booker No Distillery in Boston, Kentucky. And I didn't know there was a Boston, Kentucky. We've got to see if we can get on a station in Boston, Kentucky and make some friends around this distillery. But anyway, they're going to take the distillery green and they're going to power it with renewable natural gas. And they're going to increase their production by 50% while reducing their carbon footprint by 50%. So there's going to be a lot more Jim Beam running around for me and Dom to celebrate some of these wins that we're going to share with you later in the show. So I found that interesting. And another thing that was pretty eye-opening in that article was I had no idea that they were owned by a Japanese company. And I just found that curious because, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, Ford pickups, skull rings in your blue jeans, that we think of that as, kind of the all-American hillbilly, if you will. And here Jim Beam is actually owned by a Japanese distillery. So found that interesting. Don't know if that means anything to anybody or if any of you have some Jim Beam in your future this weekend. But when you toast up your Beam on ice, maybe some type of Japanese toast is in order. But hey, you hear the music behind me. You know what that means? That is my cue. We'll be back in 2. Sit tight for 2 short minutes. On the other side of this break, Dom and I are going to dig into your questions and more of the data.
Buying a home can be stressful. Willow Title Services will help you close the deal. Offering tailored services for your unique home buying needs, you'll have a single team member guide you from day one to the day you get your keys. They have a combined 50 years of experience, so trust the closing experts and contact them today. Visit WillowTitleServices.com. That's WillowTitleServices.com. Willow Title Services is rooted in experience to help you get to closing.
Here's another 5-star review.
My wife and I own a small business. And the way our accountant file our taxes, we don't show much income on tax returns. Because of this, it looks as if we don't make the money. This was a problem for our bank when we applied for a mortgage. But not for Mark. He verifies our income by using our monthly bank statements. Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team made a big difference for me. Yes, I am happy to recommend Mr. Mortgage Mark.
Hey, it's mark-eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com, www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you heard the man. 855-462-7292 is the Anytime Hotline, and that is how you get your questions on the air. You can call or text that number, 855-462-7292, and Dom will get your questions on the air. And Dom and I were tipping back some, Jim Beam. We were talking about Jim Beam. I can't believe my attention span is like a moth lately. We were tipping back the Jim Beam at the break, talking about that metaphorical analogy that I used regarding God saving the guy off the roof during the flood. And it just made, I wasn't trying to point a finger at anybody with that, but it just made me realize how often we're frustrated by circumstances, and then we turtle in and we don't make decisions, or we make bad decisions based on our frustration. Prices are too high, I can't afford anymore. Interest rates are too high, I can't afford anymore. Well, guys, you're paying rent, right? So you can afford something. You might not race out to the fancy neighborhood in the suburbs and buy the 4-bedroom with the pool and the 3-car garage, but you can afford something. And we're talking to more and more clients each week who are just, they're fed up renting because they see what they missed out on over the last few years in appreciation. And a lot of parents are helping their children buy houses. And I have a sneaking hunch it's because they're tired of loaning their kids money. Because the surest way to get your kid to stop asking you for money, your adult child, is to encourage them to tap their own equity. So I share all that only because we see trends in the market. And right now, I think a lot of parents have a ton of equity in their house, and they seem to be using it to help their kids get into properties. And I'm happy to share some strategies with you off the air around that. It's just, I share that only because I've had a few phone calls this week about how to make that work. So if you need us during the week, just give us a shout, 855-462-7292. But back to letting the news of the day frustrate you into making a bad decision. I was at my world-famous Cumberland Farms gassing up, and the credit card machines at the pump aren't working. So you've got to go in and prepay, right? Well, that's the big guess. How much do I put in? My tank holds 80, but I got a quarter. Do I prepay for 70? I don't know. So the guy in front of me he said he was on empty. He needs gas. He didn't know how much gas. Long story short, after truly, this is no exaggeration, I timed it, 7 minutes at the register, because I was already at the other register, and I just I'm a student of human nature, so I watched this guy go back and forth for 7 minutes about how frustrated he was that he can't fill up at the pump. Long story short, he just said, you know what, let me put $20 in. Well, $20 at today's gas prices barely got him down the street to the next station. So all he did was put off the inevitable, right? He's got to go buy more gas, and he made his day super, super frustrating. And I get it. If the pumps would have been working, it would have been an easier transaction for him. But long story short, he only hurt himself and maybe the few people behind him in line. But my point in that is, take the news that's coming at you, play the hand that you're dealt. And in this market today, there's still opportunity out there, and people are still winning. I mean, we've got a couple wins from the week. I want to give a shout out to Aaron and Lindsay. Hey guys, thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey. This is a super cool couple who relocated from the Carolinas, sold their house up there. She's in a hotel with the kids in the Carolinas waiting for the house to close. He's already transferred down here. But long story short, they made it happen. They made it happen in record time. They sold 2 properties up there and bought a property down here all in 30 days. And they're going to make this their dream home. And they bought a killer little, I call it a ranch. I think it's like 7 acres in Okeechobee. And she does therapy. She's a horse lady, and they've got horses on the property. That's why they bought out there. And she's going to do therapy for, I think it's children in cancer. I'm not sure, but I just thought that was a cool story. So thank you for letting us be a part of that. And then Calvin and his wife allowed us to help them, and they're buying a property. And both of these buyers used the strategy where they took some of the reduction in price that the seller was willing to concede, and they bought the interest rate down. So they both got a surprisingly low interest rate compared to the market, and they used the seller's money to do that. And you hear me talking about that all the time, and I'm happy to help you if you have questions around that. But that being said, it is question time. Let me throw it over to Dom and see what he's got question-wise.
Terrence is asking, if we buy now with these higher rates, how soon can we refinance if rates go back down? Do you think they'll drop next year?
Hey, Terrence, that's a great question. A lot of people are wondering that very same thing. You can refinance as soon as it makes sense for rates to go, once rates go back down, if they go back down. And you just heard me mention those 2 families that use the rate buy down strategy to get a good rate now. And here's the cool thing about that is if rates go down, right, then you can always refinance. If they stay where they are or continue to march up, you're ahead of the game. But to answer your question, there's no hard and fast rule. A lot of loan programs will tell you 6 months, but you can refinance as soon as it makes sense. So I hope that helps. If you have questions around that, give me a shout. But also consider using some of these more creative strategies to grab a rate now that you may not have to refinance, because that's the thing, right? And I guess that's where I was going with that, airy-fairy philosophical story about the guy on the roof with the water, is we don't know what's coming next. It could be more water. You know what I mean? It could be worse situations tomorrow than today, because today is worse than it was yesterday. So I share that only to encourage you. If you can pull it off now and refinance later, great. Or if you can pull it off now and buy down a rate that you'll be happy to live with, that's great too. So wonderful question. A lot of people are thinking that. So I appreciate that question. Hey, Dom, what else do we have?
Anna sent this one. I heard it's harder to get a loan on a condo since the Surfside building collapse. Is this true?
Hey, Anna, that's a great question. And it's true in the sense that the condo questionnaire has gotten more difficult as far as underwriting, right? They're asking more questions around the structural condition of the building, if the if the association members won't answer the question, the board members, the questions regarding that, then they're auditing the most recent 6 months minutes of the meetings, and they're looking for anything referencing deferred maintenance. And it's all to offset any risk around a poorly managed condo, right? They don't have enough money in the budget to handle repairs. We're seeing a lot of that, right? But because of that, it's a little more difficult with the front end of it, having the association documents reviewed before the lender will sign off on the building, on the project, if you will. And then from there, there's a slightly higher interest rate from as far as lending on condos, again, associated with some perceived risk around that. Fair or not, I don't know. There's a lot of pushback in the industry. We're trying to make it a smoother procedure because I think we have a tendency to overreact to things, and I think we overreacted as an industry a little bit around the questionnaire process. But one of the big things that's jumping out at a lot of people is the budget, right? You need to have 10% in reserves, and if those reserve requirements aren't met, then it's a difficult transaction to finance. And by difficult, I'm just alluding to a larger down payment being required because there's, again, a little more associated risk around it. But, you know, it's a fluid market. Things are changing all the time. And as quickly as these guidelines changed, we're hoping that they refine it a little bit. But honestly, you're going to want to buy in an association that's, you know, managed financially or fiscally responsibly, because that was a lot of blees in that. But because what if there is an unforeseen expense? You want to make sure the association has the money, because the alternative to them paying it out of the reserves is to have to reach in everybody's pocket in the form of an assessment. So a well-managed condo right now is not a problem. It's some of the associations who may not have all of the reserve requirements met to be considered a warrantable condo. We're seeing a little bit of that right now, and a lot of the associations are trying to manage it really tight to the bone to keep dues down, which is great if you're paying dues. It's not great if you're trying to build up reserves as an association to offset any future problems. So, hey, that was a great question. I hope that helps. But as always, if you need more information around that, do not hesitate to call us. But hey, you hear the music, you know what that is. That is my cue. We'll be back in 2 on the other side of this break. We're going to have a lot more mortgage fun and get to more of your questions. Thanks.
Buying your home is likely the biggest transaction you'll ever make. With stakes that high, you need certainty. Willow Title Services strives to take the stress away by providing a single point of contact with clear communication, resulting in a painless and positive experience. Willow Title Services has over 50 years in industry-leading and closing techniques, rooting them in the experience needed to get you to close. Call Willow Title Services at 561-737-1630 or online at willowtitleservices.com.
Here's another 5-star review.
We started our loan with a different company. They said we were approved, but at the last minute they told us there was a problem. I still don't know what went wrong, but thankfully our real estate agent told us about Mark. I was pretty stressed, but it's the perfect house, so we gave Mark a shot. He got it done. I'm not sure what was different, but I don't really care. We even got a better interest rate and with less money out of pocket than the first guy quoted us. It was a great surprise. Yes, I'm happy to recommend Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's mark-eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com, www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark-eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show, and you are still in the right place if you want the information and the data that you need to make better real estate and mortgage decisions for you and your family. I'm laughing because we're cutting up in here during the break, but hey, I want to give a shout out to Willow Title Services. You hear at each spot break, we run a commercial for them. They are awesome people. We're happy to have them as a sponsor of the show. Willow Title Services, they just relocated their offices, or they're in the process of it, to better serve the clients. And I was talking to Heather about this the other day, Heather Candela, who runs the team with her mom, and they're putting together a very impressive strategy. They've got an army, if you will, of mobile closers. So they can send somebody anywhere in the state right to you to close your transaction. So if you're closing a transaction on your own, or you're an agent and you're looking for a trusted title partner, don't hesitate to give them a shout. Willow Title Services. You can find them online at willowtitleservices.com, or give them a shout at 561-737-1630. And if you ever need information regarding anybody that we talk about, or any programs that we talk about on the show, give us a shout during the week, and I'll be happy to get you in touch with any of my resources. Had a really cool conversation with a listener this week, I guess it was. I was going to say from last week's show. He called me with questions regarding insurance, and I was happy to refer him to an insurance agency that we refer a lot of our clients to. Long story short, he's saving a bundle on his policy and was super happy. So if you ever need anything around that, give us a shout. 855-462-7292. That being said, let's keep your questions rolling. I'm going to throw it over to Dom to see what he has next.
George sent the text. I know people say that the Fed doesn't control mortgage rates, but every time the Fed changes the prime rate, mortgage rates jump too. Why is this happening?
Hey, George, I have a feeling that you are saying me. Are you pointing your finger at me when you say people say? It's interesting, right? So the Federal Reserve overnight rate controls the prime rate and controls things like credit card interest rates, adjustable rate, HELOCs, or home equity lines of credit, business lines of credit. Most of those, if not all of them, are adjustable rate debt instruments that are tied to prime, right? So the overnight rate is what the Federal Reserve or banks will borrow money at. What they sell you the money at is the prime rate plus a margin. So every time that rate comes up, all your other debt has a tendency to come up as well, because it's now costing the banks more money to borrow it. So it's costing them a higher interest rate to borrow money, so they've got to sell it to you at a higher interest rate. And they keep their margin, right? Think of profit margin. So the index is the prime rate, and as that changes, you keep adding the margin to the index to get whatever rate you have on your credit card or your HELOC. That being said, what's happening in the market right now, because it does appear that there's direct correlation at the moment because they're marching in lockstep, it has more to do with the overall monetary policy that the Fed is enacting to try to cool inflation. Now, I'm not going to turn this into mortgage, mortgage economics 101, because I have a tendency to really ramble on this topic, and I know a lot of eyes are going to glaze over. But long story short, during the pandemic, the Federal Reserve was the largest buyer of mortgage-backed security. So every time somebody borrows money in the form of a mortgage, several of those are put into a big pile, and a security instrument, a bond, right, is issued against all of that mortgage debt, and they sell that to recapitalize so they can go loan more money. Now, when everybody's buying, as we talk about all the time with supply and demand, when everybody is buying, prices have a tendency to go up. When nobody's buying, prices go down. Well, in the world of mortgage-backed securities, when prices go down because nobody's buying, interest rates go up. Well, the Federal Reserve has announced their balance sheet reduction portion of all of this inflation-fighting action, which is going to take the largest buyer of mortgage-backed securities out of the game. So that's what's happening. There's not as many buyers of these securities, so it's causing interest rates to go up. And the Federal Reserve, in the face of this CPI number, has two things. They have to raise interest rates, and they've got to commit to the balance sheet reduction in their mind to get inflation under control. So long story short, that's what's happening. This rate increase was more around the news of the CPI number than the Fed raising the rate. And I know they feel like they're moving at the same pace. They are moving in the same direction, and they typically do, but one is not directly connected to the other. You know, it's like, I don't know, it gets dark out when the cloud comes over and then it starts to rain. I guess that's a bad analogy because the cloud caused the rain and the darkness. But anyway, I hope that makes sense. I tried too hard right there to mansplain it, and I apologize. But I'd love to have a conversation with you off the air, maybe over a cup of coffee about this if you want to deep dive it, because I love geeking out on this stuff. I appreciate the question. I know it's super confusing because you hear it all the time that the two aren't directly tied together, but they do have a tendency to look like that on paper. So I appreciate that question and certainly welcome a call around that. But hey, let me toss it over to Dom and keep it going.
Derek sent a text. I used a VA loan several years ago in Texas. I don't currently own a house. Is there any way I can use a VA loan again?
Hey, Derek, that is a fantastic question. Absolutely. Yes, you can. There is, and you have an opportunity, right? So a lot of people think you can only use that VA loan one time, and that is not the case. You can reissue your eligibility. I have some questions that I would need to ask you. Did you sell that? Was the loan in good standing? Was it a foreclosure? I mean, there are some things that we need to know to see what level of eligibility you may have. But it's called subsequent use, and you certainly can use your VA. You can go from buy a house, sell it, buy a house, sell it, buy a house, sell it, and use your VA entitlement each of those times. So there's even certain circumstances where you can have two VA loans at the same time. That's a little more nuanced and doesn't happen often. But yes, to answer your question, you can use a VA loan again. And one other fun fact, there's no age limit. You know, you can be a World War II vet, and God bless you if you're still walking this earth with us, you can borrow money using your VA entitlement. So, hey, one other fun fact about VA, if you have been class disabled, you can have your funding fee sometimes waived 100%, and you'll pay less property taxes. So I love the VA loan product. I'm glad to see that we've gotten past that false sense of the market had this false sense about VA loans that they were difficult and risky for the seller, which is all a bunch of garbage. They're a fantastic loan product. So thank you for your service, brother. And yes, sir, you can use that loan again. Hey, Dom, what else do we have?
Nick sent an email. I've been listening to your show for a few months and hear you talk about landlords. Will this work for a vacant property? How do I figure out the rental income?
Hey, that's a great question, Nick, and thank you. You're a glutton for punishment, huh? Still listening. Well, we appreciate you, my man. So the landlord loan that Nick is talking about is designed for purchasing investment properties, right? As it sounds, landlord loan. The very cool thing about it is we use the income from the property to offset the debt of the loan, thus not requiring you to disclose income. You just disclose assets, credit, and then as long as the property cash flows, then you're good. And in Nick's circumstance here, he's asking about a property that's vacant. Well, we don't do it. We order the appraisal. When the appraiser goes out to appraise an income-producing property, they do an analysis of rents in the area. So they'll put a rent schedule together based on average rents of the area, and that number can be used in the landlord loan calculation on the income side, even though it's currently vacant. So hopefully that helps. It's a great question. You can use the landlord loan for Airbnb properties. And in this case, if the property is not currently rented, you can still use the landlord loan. And we just evaluate the income that's disclosed, income that's disclosed in that portion of the appraisal. So anyway, you hear that music, you know what that means. That is the 2-minute warning. That's my cue. We'll be back in 2. On the other side of this break, we're going to deep dive more of your questions and continue the mortgage mania. So sit tight. We'll be back in 2 short minutes.
New to South Florida and ready to sit down roots with a new home? Willow Title Services makes closing a smooth, painless, and positive experience. With individual service for each buyer's needs, Willow Title Services has a combined 50 years plus of experience with industry-leading closing techniques. Call Willow Title Services today at 561-737-1630. That's 561-737-1630. Online at willowtitleservices.com. Willow Title Services is rooted in experience to help you get to closing.
Here's another 5-star review.
As a realtor, I have a bunch of mortgage brokers to choose from, but I prefer to work with Mark and his Mr. Mortgage team. In this crazy market, there is no room for error, especially on the mortgage side. Mark's team moves fast, keeps everybody in the loop, and makes things happen. They always give my clients a great deal and take the time to walk them through every step of the process. When you're considering a lender, I encourage you to talk to Mark-eitel and the Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's Mark-eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com, www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark-eitel, and you are tuned in to the Mr. Mortgage Show. We do this each week right here, same time, same station. Dom is manning the Anytime hotline, which is 855-462-7292. He's running around back there, manning the board, the hotline, the emails, the text. The guy is amazing. So speaking of that, if you prefer to send the email, you can do that by visiting the website, which is mr.mortgage, never a .com. Just go up to the address bar, type in mr.mortgage, boom. There we are. Upper right-hand corner is the Contact Us button. So you can get your questions to us that way too, or the Anytime hotline, 855-462-7292. So, hey, I was thinking about this. I had a conversation with a buddy of mine who is a host of a radio show. Imagine that, right? And he's on several stations all over the country. And we were talking about people who listen from the app. And you guys know that you can catch us live on the iHeart app. And the podcast is on all of the players. So, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everything. We're sandwiched right in there between Joe Rogan and Barack Obama on Spotify, which would be quite an interesting conversation to be in the middle of. But we got into this conversation about where people listen from. So I have an idea. Do me a favor and shoot us an email or a text and just let us know where you're listening from. And whoever's the farthest away, I'll give you a prize. I don't know what it'll be. We'll run this for a while. I think it'll be fun. You can call or text too, that information. Call, text, or email where you're listening from, city and state. And if you're out of the country, then, give us that info too. Hey, maybe we'll send you a Women of Walmart calendar for 2023. I'm not too proud to admit that I have an ongoing subscription to the calendar service. So when my big pack of Women of Walmart calendars are delivered for next year, I'll peel one of those off and send it to whoever's listening from the most remote location. So that might be fun. So if you are into the ladies of Walmart and you want her hanging on your wall, 1 month at a time, we'll send you that calendar. But anyway, let me throw it. Hey, Dom, do you want one of those calendars?
Sure.
The ladies of Walmart. Anyway, let me throw it over to Dom for another question.
Here's a question from Brandon. What's the best way to have you help me get pre-qualified? I'm a first-time buyer.
Hey, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I would be honored to help you, my man. You can call 855-462-7292. And because you sent us your information, I have I have your number, so I'll text you back, and we'll get together on the phone and talk through what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. We'll talk about, your price and your payment goals. We'll look at where rates are, and I'll be happy to walk you through it. So thank you for that. I'm happy that you're giving us a shot at. But yeah, thanks for that. I'm happy to help. So I appreciate the opportunity. Hey, I'm going to throw it over to Dom for another question.
Shauna is asking, we got a refinance quote from our bank, and they say we need title insurance again. What is title insurance? Don't we have it from when we bought the house?
Hey, Shauna, that is a great question, and it's a super confusing, mythical monster, title insurance, kind of like the Loch Ness Monster. Everybody thinks they've seen it, and they think they know what it is, but they really have no idea. So, hey, title insurance insures you and your lender, your lien holder, against any encumbrances on the property that happened prior to you owning it. So yes, when you bought the property, you have a great memory. Actually, you know what? If I would have known this question was coming, I would have had Heather answer this, but I'm not going to bother her on a Saturday. The day that you bought the property, that title insurance policy was issued to protect both you and your lender against, anything that happened prior to you owning the property. If there's an old lien that comes back against the property after that happened, then you can use the title insurance to, satisfy that situation. Now, here's the challenge. You've owned the property for a while, and you're now getting a higher loan amount, assuming that that's the case. That's often the case when you're doing a refinance. So there's new and more insurance required. So if you've owned the property for 5 years or 7 years, that gap is what they're looking to insure. What did you incur any liens or encumbrances against the property that might come back since your period of ownership? So that's why a new policy is required. Here's the thing. You can get a reissue credit. So get your original policy and present it to the title company that's closing your refinance, and you can get a reissue credit so that new policy is not as much money. And if you haven't picked a lender or a title company, I'd love to jump in and take a look. And I know Heather down at Willow Title can knock it out of the park too. And even if you don't use me as a lender and you just want a title insurance company to explain this and give you a competitive quote, I would encourage you to give them a call. WillowTitleServices.com is the easiest place to find them. But thank you for that question. It's a good one. It confuses everybody. There's a ton of insurance, right? Mortgage insurance, which covers the difference between 80% of the value and what you actually borrowed. Doesn't help you, insures the lender against loss. Title insurance, which we just covered, and then also homeowners insurance. So you're super insured when you buy a property, and you may even need flood insurance depending on where you are. So hopefully that helps. Let me throw it over to Dom for another question.
Chip sent a text. My friend offered to sell me his house for $400,000. We think it will appraise for at least $425,000 to $430,000. How do we make this work so we can buy the rate down like you suggest? Can you help me with the loan and how to structure this?
Hey, that is a great question, and congratulations on finding this opportunity, right? So we talk about it all the time, and this is super cool. I'm excited to walk you through this. So you're going to want to write the contract at, let's say, for argument's sake, $425,000. Maybe it appraises for more. I don't know. But you write the contract at $425,000, and you put language in the contract to this effect, if you will. Seller agrees to contribute $25,000 towards the buyer's closing costs, third-party fees, discount points, and non-allowables. That'll lump it all together into one sentence so that you can use it for whatever. So $425,000 purchase price with language in the contract that says seller agrees to contribute $25,000 towards buyers and then list it out. In this case, discount points or rate buy down. I'm happy to walk you through more details about that. We certainly can help give you some guidance on that. And if you don't have someone you're comfortable with writing the contract, I can refer you to somebody. And as far as helping with the loan, we can absolutely help with the loan. And we can do your pre-approval based on a $425,000 purchase with a seller contribution of $25,000, knowing that it's going to buy the rate down. And who knows, there might be money left over there's a good chance there's going to be money left over in that number to help with some of your closing costs. So great question. And another example, guys, let me just hold Chip up for a minute here as an example, because it's another example of opportunity in this market when everybody's walking around talking about the sky is falling. Here, Chip is walking into an opportunity to take $25,000 and buy the rate down on a property and have his happily ever after interest rate. And the other two people I shared a little bit earlier, they both did the same thing. And the people with the horse farm, their purchase price was $30,000 less than the appraisal. So they're walking into instant equity. So guys, I share that only because in the face of doom and gloom, there's still opportunity out there, and owning real estate still makes sense. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Even if houses never appreciate again, ever, for the rest of time, let's say Chip buys this house for $425,000 and it's only ever worth $425,000. Well, just by making that mortgage payment, he can write off the interest that he pays each year. He can write off the certain expenses against the house. It puts you in a different tax bracket. You're paying less taxes. So even if rent and mortgage are the same and it never appreciates, it still makes sense to own real estate. So anyway, that's why I do what I do. I just believe in the creation of equity wealth, and I encourage first-time buyers to get in the market only because the sooner you get in, the better off you're going to be in the long run. So, excuse me, I'm a little froggy. But anyway, you hear the music. That's my cue. We will be back in 2 very short minutes. I'm going to take a drink of water so I don't sound like this, and we'll take more of your questions on the other side of this break.
Buying a home can be stressful. Willow Title Services will help you close the deal. Offering tailored services for your unique home buying needs, you'll have a single team member guide you from day one to the day you get your keys. They have a combined 50 years of experience, so trust the closing experts and contact them today. Visit WillowTitleServices.com. That's WillowTitleServices.com. Willow Title Services is rooted in experience to help you get to closing.
Here's another 5-star review.
We kept our business above water with credit cards during the pandemic. I'm glad we did. Business is better than ever. But I didn't want to be a slave to those credit card payments. I called Mark about the REC loan he advertises. Long story short, we did a REC refinance and paid off everything, even the car. Now we only have the mortgage payment. We're saving a bunch every month. Yes, we are happy to recommend Mark and the Mr. Mortgage team.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Are inflation and everyday expenses eating into your retirement income? Maybe you've considered a reverse mortgage and have unanswered questions like, do I still own my property? Can the bank kick me out? What happens when I die? Can I still leave my house to my kids? These are all great questions. Visit www.moreaboutreverse.com to learn more. That's www.moreaboutreverse.com. www.moreaboutreverse.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. And there we go. My voice is a little bit better. Dom slid that bottle of Jim Beam across the board for me, so I feel like, okay, much better. Anyway, I don't know what happened. Started talking about interest rates, and I got all choked up over here. But maybe it was all that karaoke last night. That's never good for anybody. We did karaoke and sang... oh my God, what's the Queen song? I'm just a poor boy, no. Anyway, a Bohemian Rhapsody. And we did Bohemian Rhapsody. And a friend from the crowd came up and said, That's the best, worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, give me the mic. Anyway, singing is not my forte, and apparently talking is difficult for me today with this froggy voice. But anyway, my name's Mark Eitel. You're listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. We do this each week right here, and Dom is over there manning the board, getting your questions to me, and I know he's got a few more, so let me toss it over to him for another question.
Armando is asking, I saw the big jump in rates this week, with the Feds getting ready to increase the rates again next week. Do you think this will be the straw that breaks the housing markets back?
Wow, Armando, that's a great question. I don't think this is the straw that breaks the back. I think the housing market is like the high heel shoe under the foot of the unusually large woman walking through the mall. And it somehow keeps holding up every time another step is taken. You're expecting that heel to break. And we see that with the housing market every time there's another. And this is nothing against big women. I love you ladies. I'm sorry. Just I think in pictures, and that jumped in my mind because we were talking about the women of Walmart earlier in the show. But no, I don't. I think the fundamentals of housing are based on supply and demand. And right now, there's still not enough supply to quell demand. The cost of capital only slows demand. It doesn't increase supply. I don't see a lot of foreclosures coming to the market. There's a lot of reasons why. You've heard me talk about it. Hey, check out the Facebook page. There's a ton of good information there. Go to Facebook and search The Mr. Mortgage Show. There's a video that I spend about 8 or 10 minutes talking just about this topic and why I think this market is different and it's holding up under the interest rate. So anyway, that's a great question. We get a lot of it, so I understand the confusion around it. But hey, while we have a second, I just want to say thanks. We've had a lot of great questions this week. I know we started off out of the box with a question regarding the interest rates and where we think they're going next year. And, none of us have a crystal ball. I just caution you, what source of information are you listening to? Because a lot of the same people who are saying rates are going to fall in December of 2021 said they're not going to go past 3.3%. So just, look at past history when you're buying into, when you're drinking somebody's Kool-Aid, you want to see the hand that mixed the Kool-Aid, I guess is where I'm going with that. So, but yeah, we had some good questions. We talked about, the Fed not controlling interest rates. We talked about the best way to get pre-qualified for first-time buyers. We talked about the challenges around financing a condo. So there's that frog again. I need some more of that Jim Beam. But we've had a lot of good questions so far. But anyway, I just wanted to say thanks for that. You guys are the backbone of the show. Without your questions, it would just be Dom and I in this bottle of Jim Beam. Hey, maybe we should try that one Saturday. It might be a little more fun. But no, thanks for your questions. If you have questions, 855-462-7292 is the Anytime hotline. And use that during the week when we're not on the air. That pushes to my office. So, hey, I'm going to ask you a favor. You hear me ask it at the end of each show. If any of this resonates, if you know somebody who's got questions about real estate, they may be thinking of buying or selling or refinancing, or they're just wondering, does it make sense to jump in the market right now? Where are rates going to go? We talk about it each week. Please share the show with them. You can listen to all the back episodes of the show, as well as the podcast episodes at MrMortgageRadio.com. That's MrMortgageRadio.com. Check out the website, too. There's a ton of good info there. You can also find the podcast and links to all of the other resources. And that you can find by going up to your address bar and simply typing in Mr.Mortgage. There's no .com, just Mr.Mortgage. Hit enter and we will pop right up. Last time, I'm going to throw this out there, 855-462-7292 is the Anytime hotline, and that works during the week too. So, hey, you hear the music, you know what that means. We are at the end of another week. My God, it went fast. We have so much fun with you on the air. Give us a shout if you need us. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. We will be right back next week, same time, same station.
That's a wrap. Join Mark Eitel next week for more thrilling, edge-of-your-seat discussions about real estate and mortgages right here on The Mr. Mortgage Show.
This is a story about a real person named Sarah. She thought she was living a better life with opioids. When she was pregnant with her fourth child, she started to use harder drugs. She wanted to be a good mom, but she didn't know how. Not giving up on the hope of recovery was the most important thing she could do. If you or someone you know needs to find care and treatment, dial 211. This ad is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health in Broward County through a CDC Financial Assistance Award in Broward County, Florida. Contents are those of the author and do not represent an endorsement.
Some people don't understand why you've already busted out the sweaters. They may raise a brow at keeping scarecrows out year-round, but you just go ahead. Let them stare, because you eat, sleep, and drink pumpkin at Dunkin'. So sip your classic spiced and iced $3 medium pumpkin spice signature latte, or try the bold pumpkin cream cold brew, an ultra-smooth brew topped with pumpkin cream cold foam. Also $3 for a medium. All so you can fall harder. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Terms apply.